late 80s to early 90s in Northern Ireland. I was a kid of around 7 or 8. The sun was shining and it was sometime in the early afternoon. My dad needed to return a library book in the Crumlin Road, a Protestant loyalist area in Belfast. We were Catholics, and the Crumlin Road was notoriously dangerous at the time, still is to a lesser extent. So I was already a little on edge, just knowing the reputation of the place. My dad was cool though, didn't seem worried or anything. It's not like we have Catholic printed on our foreheads. He did say, however, that I had to pretend to have a different name if anyone asked me. My name is one which marks you as a Catholic, so I adopted a Protestant name for the trip. We came to a road which led to an intersection, across which was a predominantly Catholic Republican enclave called the Ardoyne Road. We were headed to the right, down a long winding path, but further up the road ahead, towards the intersection, we could see a group of men. One of them was running back and forth across the road, relaying information between two pockets of people. Some were staring across the road towards the Catholic area. Some were talking to a man in a parked but running car. One in particular stuck out. He had long hair and a leather jacket and was very tall, at least compared to the other men. It all looked suspicious even to me as a child, although I didn't know why, but my dad's demeanor changed to a more serious and quiet one, and I took it as confirmation that we weren't safe. He was from Belfast. We were living in a town outside of Belfast at the time, and grew up when things were at their worst here, so he knew the ropes and knew the signs that something was happening. We weren't walking towards the men, so it wasn't a problem. We crossed to the right and started walking away. This is when a woman approached us. She was middle-aged with short red hair. She saw us coming and made a purposeful beeline towards us. She seemed preoccupied, nervous. She started grilling my dad immediately, asking who he was and where he was coming from. She was talking in a, "I'm trying my best to sound casual, but I'm failing" manner. I could feel my entire body beginning to boil with fear, and I felt as though I was mere moments away from being discovered. It was like a horror movie, where someone finds themselves in a small town where everyone is in a cult or something, and they're trying to blend in but are drawing suspicion and are losing themselves in an ever-increasing paranoia. I suddenly had visions of my dad getting shot and me screaming over his corpse, maybe even getting shot myself despite being a child. The longer my dad and the woman talked, the more I was starting to lose the ability to hear, as though my head was underwater. I was holding my dad's hand, and I was struggling to keep a grip because of the sweat pumping out of my palm. I didn't know how or why, but something primal in me recognized that we were in serious danger. It was clear that she was a part of whatever was going on around the corner and was trying to manage and analyze the flow of foot traffic, especially that of strangers like us. Given that she and us were the only people on the street, she had been doing a good job. She was fishing hard for information about us. My dad played it cool and responded to her questions without really revealing much, doing a much better job of being casual than she was. The area we were from, he explained, was mixed, i.e., Protestant and Catholic, and he feigned displeasure at that fact, trying to signal that he hated Catholics and was somewhat miffed to have to live amongst them without ever actually using those words. It was subtle, and I was terrified that I might need to participate in the conversation because there's no way I could dance around the truth as well as my dad was doing. He explained that he was just here to return a book, which he showed her as proof. She asked about me, my name, and I gave her the fake name. She surely read the terror in my face and could hear it in my voice. My dad decided that that was the time to break off and say, "Nice to meet you, all the best," and started walking away with me. I could sense that the woman didn't budge and just stood and stared at us as we walked away. I glanced over my shoulder after about 30 seconds and just caught a glimpse of her turning and walking towards the road where the men were gathered. We rounded a corner and were now at the top of a very long and steep road path with the library at the very bottom of it. The path was fenced on one side, and on the other side was a row of houses. It felt like we were walking deeper into danger and that we had only two routes of escape: keep going or turn back the way we came. About partway down the road, we realized we were being followed. My dad told me to run ahead and check that the library was opened, and I hesitated. He said it was oak and to just go and check. I glanced over my shoulder. It was the man in the leather jacket with the long hair. I did what my dad wanted and ran ahead, heart pounding and ears pricked, awaiting the crack of gunfire. I checked the door was opened, and I ran back up. As I was coming back, I saw that the man in the leather jacket had turned and was making his way back up the road. My dad looked unfazed, but was walking with a certain rigidity, like something had happened in the time it took me to run to the library and back again, and he hadn't quite unclenched his fists yet. He said it was oak and we were safe. I asked about the man following us. He said he sent me ahead, and when I was a safe distance away, he stopped and turned around to face him, ready for whatever happened. He said he was expecting violence, but as he turned around, the leather jacket dude immediately put his head down, turned, and walked back the way he came. My dad watched him for a few seconds and then started making his way back towards me. That afternoon, within the hour we were there, a Catholic taxi driver was murdered in that street. The vibes that something terrible was going to happen were justified, and I've never felt as terrified as I did that day. When the news about the taxi driver was on TV that night, I knew I had seen the planning of a murder, and I knew we had walked into the middle of it. I could probably have identified both the woman and the leather jacket man had I been asked about them by the police, but that was never going to happen. No way my dad would have volunteered himself, and therefore me, to the cops to be a witness against a terrorist cell. 2 years later, found out from my dad that it wasn't the Shankill Road, but the Crumlin Road. Corrected the post accordingly. I can't remember how old I was, but was definitely not older than 10 or younger than 8. But now I'm still traumatized from it. As a black man growing up in the mid-50s through the 60s, Dad suffered a lot of abuse, both at home and outside of it. He even ended up joining the Vietnam War at the very end, fresh out of high school. Because of this, he developed a heavy drinking and drug problem that I wasn't fully aware of as a child. As you can probably guess, this led him to being abusive himself, mostly towards my mom. I don't remember a lot of my childhood because I blacked a lot of it out, but there's only a couple of nights I'll never forget. A little more backstory: I was and am the youngest sibling and was named after him, before changing it myself, so I didn't really endure a lot of the physical abuse myself, and for the most part, I was always quiet and just tried to stay out of trouble. On to the story though. It was a normal Saturday night. My siblings and I were watching TV, my dad was with his brother somewhere drinking, and surprisingly, my mom was at a neighbor's, single older woman, just enjoying herself. A couple weeks before this, my dad ended up getting hurt at work and was on some pretty strong pain pills, so I'm guessing that the large amount of alcohol and possibly heavy drug use lead to what happened next. The next moments are a little fuzzy, but from what I remember, my parents both ended up home and began arguing very loudly, with my dad accusing my mom of cheating on him. I remember we had this big glass table in our living room, and he was so pissed off he slammed his fists on it and shattered it. After that, it all turned physical as he began attacking my mom. She did fight back though, while myself and my brother just stood there crying out, eyes out, begging them to stop. At some point, my sister was about 13, jumped on him and he tossed her into a door, actually breaking it like it was nothing. During all of this, my dad's brother, who was in his 60s or 70s, was trying to talk him down, but it was like nothing was getting to him. Eventually, my dad walked out the door and my mom sat us all on the couch and just held us while we cried, thinking it was finally over, until my dad came back in and started pouring some liquid over all of us. It was literally gasoline, and we didn't even realize it until he poured a line outside the door and started trying to light it with a lighter then I'm still thankful wasn't working. My sister ran out the back door to another of my dad's siblings that lived a couple of blocks away. My uncle was able to stop him from trying to burn us all alive, and when he came back in, I just remember grabbing him by the waist, begging him to stop, and saying I had gas in my eyes. I think at that point it broke him out of whatever came over him because he just began apologizing and checking to see if I was hurt. Then he ran off. The thing is though, the worst part isn't that my mom didn't press charges or that he was only in jail over cocky weekend. It's the fact he doesn't remember any of it, while I think about it almost every day. I do still have a relationship with my dad though, albeit strained. He is completely sober now, and an amazing grandparent to my siblings' kids who he sees every day. Although he's part of the reason I don't think I could ever have kids. I'm not really good at storytelling, so I'm sorry if it gets a little hard to read. I can further explain anything though. When I was younger, I was abducted and raped by a couple that offered me a ride home from school. I had posted my story about a year ago on the rape counseling subreddit, and recently posted my story again on a police subreddit asking for advice about filing a police report. But they basically told me it wouldn't accomplish anything, and that there is zero chance this will get solved since it was years ago and I don't know the identity of my rapists or the exact location where it occurred. Here's what I wrote. Years ago, I was walking home from school when a car pulled up next to me, and the people in it asked me if I'd like a ride home. They were a couple, and since it was a man and woman and they seemed friendly, I felt safe getting into the car with them. When I got in the car, their demeanor changed and they told me they had to go to their house really quick to pick something up first. They were whispering to each other during the ride and I couldn't make out what they said. When we arrived at the house, they told me to go into the house with them. At this point, I knew something wasn't right, but I was afraid to say no, so I did what they said. Once we got into the house, the woman grabbed me and pushed me to the floor. She started to hold me down, so I was kicking, yelling, and struggling, and this made the woman even madder, so she punched me in the face and told me she was going to tie rope around me if I continued to struggle. She then tells me I have to take my clothes off, and at this point, I'm on the verge of crying and begging her to please let me go. She tells me to stop acting like a crybaby and just do it. The guy then joins her in holding me down, and they both start taking my clothes off since I'm still crying and begging them to let me go. When I'm naked, the guy takes off his clothes and the woman is telling me to keep my eyes shut or she'll hit me. The guy then rapes me from behind. After several minutes of this, I feel something sharp inserted into my behind, and I start to scream in pain. I open my eyes, but the woman holds my head down and threatens me again to keep my eyes closed, so I close them again. The guy finishes raping me, and when he's done, I'm just lying on the floor bleeding and not saying or reacting to anything, while the guy puts his clothes back on and talks to the woman. They tell me to get my clothes back on, so I start to do as I'm told. When I finished with putting my clothes back on, they tell me to get back in the car. As we are walking to leave the house, the woman starts laughing. She looks to the guy and says, "Look how much his ass is bleeding." There was blood seeping through the back of my pants. She then laughs again and says, "You might want to cover that up." I take my jacket off and then wrap it around my waist to cover up the bleeding. Once we are in the car, they don't say anything else to me. After several minutes of driving, they let me off by the main road. They told me to get out, and after that they drove off. They didn't even threaten me not to say anything. They just told me to get out of the car. I then wandered off to a wooded area nearby. I remember how unbearable the pain was, both physically and emotionally. I felt like I wanted to break down and cry and scream at the top of my lungs, but I couldn't. I was so overwhelmed I couldn't cry at first, but after several minutes, I finally broke down and cried. What made me cry was not only what happened, but the realization that I had nobody I could turn to. My family was abusive, and at home, I was abused both physically and mentally. I knew they would blame me for getting into the car with them, so I had to keep this to myself. I had no friends at school, and basically no family. Nobody would ever comfort me or help me. I was all alone. I'm still afraid of telling people in real life because I feel I'll be viewed as damaged or looked down on for being a male victim. I don't know what to do about finding out if they were ever caught or if they have other victims. I know too much time has passed, but I'm still hoping something can be done. I actually lived near the border of my state when this happened, so I thought maybe a federal law enforcement agency would take a report since there's a chance they cross state lines to commit the rape. But like I said, I just don't know. I was born and raised in the southern US, but decided to move to Minnesota back in the early 2000s. I moved up there with the original intent of going to the University of Minnesota, as they supposedly had a good atmospheric science program, and I knew people that lived in the state, and no one in Oklahoma, or I'd have gone there. Ended up not going to college and just lived with friends. I started dating a Canadian girl, and my home was a 4-hour drive from the border up the Minnesota Arrowhead. It was just after Christmas that year, and I was heading back after spending time with my then girlfriend. It was around dusk when I left. Her house was an hour from the border. Crossed back with no problem. Started driving down Highway 61 like I've done dozens of times before. For those not familiar, this highway runs right along Lake Superior and is only traveled that late by those that live there in the few double-digit populated towns and truckers going from Duluth Superior to Thunder Bay. The weather was clear, the roads were clear, so I sailed at 60 mph like usual. Well, the road was clear until I hit a patch of black ice. I completely lost control and sailed off the highway. I didn't know if I'd go into the woods on one side or partially frozen Lake Superior on the other. Luckily, I went toward the woods, barrel rolled a few times, and landed on my wheels. I was in a shallow ravine, so my car was hard to see unless you were looking for it. I think it was single-digit temperatures outside. This was before the ubiquity of cell phones. There was zero signal where I crashed, so I was alone, freezing, and on a desolate highway near a patch of black ice that could make someone else sail right into me. I'm not sure how long I was out there, but eventually a local found me and took me to the hospital. I somehow escaped with a few cuts and bruises from the crash, and other than that, and being very cold, I was okay. The state police officer that was at the crash scene when we got back to my car said by all accounts I should have died. If not directly from the crash, then from becoming a meat popsicle. I had no way of contacting my friends or my girlfriend, and I was at least a 4-hour drive from home. The local that found me offered a place to stay until someone could come get me. I was there for 3 days until a friend in Duluth was able to come get me. His name was John, and I'll never, ever forget him. He died in 2018 at 70 years old. I had long since moved back to the South, but kept in touch with him by email. After I crashed, I was in a place I didn't really know, at night, on a road that's not traveled much that late, in winter, freezing. Every moment that passed without a car or semi passing by, I thought I would freeze to death. I was absolutely terrified. But then John came along and literally saved my life, and for that, I'll be eternally thankful. I was about 20 years old and still lived with my parents and younger siblings. I was watching TV and my sister, 16, came in and ripped the remote from me and turned it to something else. She has 5 inches on me and a God complex, so rather than try to fight for it back and get my ass beat in the process, and then getting in trouble for being mean to my baby sister, when my parents got home, since she's always been the favorite and has never faced any punishment for anything until she started getting arrested later on. I let her change the channel, and we watched what she wanted to watch. About 10 minutes before that show ended, she got up and walked out of the room and shut herself in her bedroom. The show ended, a new episode started, then that ended. She never came back. So after 45 minutes of watching this bullshit show and playing on my phone, or else I would have changed it sooner, I changed the channel back to what I was watching. 15 or 20 minutes later, my sister came back and told me to change it back. I said no, and her show had ended anyway. She told me again to change it back, but in this guttural scream. Her eyes were dark, and she looked like she was trying to will me to burst into flames. I said no again, and that she had left for an hour and her show was over. She stormed away, furniture and picture frames shaking from her, literally stomping like a child. She went into the kitchen and got a steak knife, and as she entered the living room, she said she was going to make me pay. She chased me in circles around the coffee table until I made a mad dash for my bedroom and locked the door as I slammed it and threw myself in front of it. We lived in a really rural area, so I didn't have enough service to call 911, and I couldn't grab a landline before shutting myself away. My sister shook the doorknob and ordered me to open the door so she could kill me. I stayed in front of the door. She could have easily unlocked the door since the locks were those child-safe locking doorknobs that you only needed a coin or something small to unlock from the outside, so my own body was my last line of defense. But I guess she was too angry and eventually walked away. Obviously, I didn't leave my room until my parents got back. I told them, but they brushed me off. I turned that interaction over and over in my head for weeks. How could I have done things differently? There was no de-escalating with her. If she was going to rage, she was going to rage. That much hasn't changed since she's become an adult. But anyway, a few weeks, months, I can't quite remember later, the same thing happened again. She took the remote, changed the channel, left the room before her show ended, didn't come back until well after I changed the channel back, and tried again to chase me with the same steak knife. But this time, instead of a dash to my room, I took off to the kitchen and grabbed the biggest cleaver out of the knife block. The one that was always super sharp because nobody used it but my dad would still sharpen periodically. She tore after me but stopped when I turned around with a blade 3 times the size of hers. With the same fire in her eyes, she demanded I put it down. I said no. She repeated herself, and I shouted, "Come make me, bitch!" while brandishing the cleaver. After staring into each other's eyes for a minute, she turned around and walked out of the kitchen and back to her room. She was strangely cool and calm. I don't remember if she put the knife on the table as she walked past or not, but I kept the cleaver on me as I kept watching TV. I don't remember if my parents commented on the cleaver when they came back, or if I put it away when I heard them come into the driveway, but she never attacked me with a knife again. Key words being with a knife. It wasn't just because of this incident, but how my sister is in general, but I was diagnosed with CPTSD from my dealings with her. Some of my family is still trying to tell me that we need to stop acting like children, and I need to put in the effort to have a good relationship with her, but they've never been threatened and attacked with a steak knife over changing the channel of the TV. Fuck that with a rake. Luckily for me, and not so luckily for them, some of my family has seen her true colors and are on my side. Growing up, the city I lived in had a huge Halloween cornfield attraction with several haunted houses. It was always crazy busy and crowded. When I was about 12 years old, a group of my friends made a plan to go one night. My parents were pretty strict and always anxious about me going places. They said I absolutely could not go unless the group was accompanied by parents. I lied that there would be parents, when in reality it was a group of about 6 of us, 12-year-olds. When we arrived, I was nervous because I never really lied to my parents before. The night went on and everything was going well, up until I had to go to the bathroom. The cornfield only had porta potties, so I went while my friends waited for me outside. Only, when I came out, my friends were nowhere to be found. I walked around a little bit, called them, but could not find them anywhere. At this point, I started panicking and crying. A police officer approached me and asked what was wrong. I explained that I could not find my friends, so he took my hand and said we could go to the ticket booth, so they would make an announcement over a loudspeaker for my friends to come meet me. However, the officer said we had to go back to his squad car first so he could let another officer know. As I start walking with him through the parking lot, I had an oddly specific memory. A few days prior, my dad told me about a little girl who was kidnapped by someone impersonating a police officer. My dad told me to always be suspicious of everyone, including people claiming to be police. He instructed me to always ask to see a police officer's badge and to ask them to call my parents. I stopped walking and nervously told the officer, "I am sorry, this is silly, but my dad told me I need to ask to see a police officer's badge and to tell them to call my parents." As I said this, the man's face went pale white. He let go of my hand and took off sprinting. I eventually called my parents. They came to pick me up and found the real police officers nearby. I let them know what happened, and they explained that would not have been the protocol, as the attractions didn't even have a loudspeaker to make announcements. We then filed a formal police report. pretty sure I could have been kidnapped that night. Thanks for spending your time here. I hope you enjoyed the stories. If you did, feel free to like the video and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next one.